Hey, hi everyone. Good morning. Hi Surinder. Hi Lay. Hi Fatima. Hi Pallavi. Hi Mohammed. Hi Richelin, Hanna, Banumati, Dan. Yeah, good to see you all again. Hi Tim. Hi Aruna. Hi Adam. Yeah, good seeing you all again. Hi Anbaran, Deepak, Krishna, Akila, Shubham, Rajesh, Vishnu. Okay, good to see you all. So we still have a minute to start. Uh, I already see so many messages going on in Telegram group and everything. So it looks like you guys are really learning, and not just from these classes, but on your own as well, because that's the only way to learn, right? I can only share certain information, but then it's you need to put your own effort. You need to go home, practice, learn, and I see all most of you guys are already doing that. So that's fantastic. So and we're just getting started, so hopefully when we are maybe halfway through, you pretty much have pretty good knowledge. Okay, so it's 7:30 for me, and we have almost 70 learners here. So I'm just going to wait maybe maximum 5 minutes. I'll start at 7:35, uh, just giving time for others to join. So the first 5 minutes, right? If you have any questions, you can ask me, and I'll just clarify a few things. Okay, so regarding after yesterday's class, many people I think said to not have questions like this chat, like too many questions in between. So what I'm going to do is, of course, I cannot. Some of them suggested that I should not answer anything, but that's not going to happen because that's not the purpose of that. Basically, will kill the whole purpose of having an interactive class, right? I will still be answering some questions, but what I'm going to do is uh, I'm going to take a topic, whatever I'm going to explain. I'll try to completely explain that topic, and then I will look at the Q&A section. So you have two tabs here, live chat and Q&A. You can use live chat for any internal discussions, because many of other people are also helping each other, right? So if someone wants to help, you can ask here. But if you have a specific question related to whatever I have covered, then you can ask it in the Q&A. What I'm going to do is, once I finish a particular topic, I'll go to the Q&A tab, and I'll try to look at some questions. And I'm not going to spend too much of time. Maybe I will spend 5 minutes, okay, to answer the questions. um, and if there are any questions that are unrelated to the SQL, unrelated to the course that I'm doing, then I'll try to ignore those questions. Okay. I didn't find the attachment in the light hall. Um, so you need to go to, there is an attachment section in the class page, right, Sid? So you just try to find the attachment section, and under the attachment section, you will find it. If not, join the Telegram group. In the Telegram group, I will be sharing it. Okay, so another 3 minutes. Okay, so one question: were you guys able to finish that assignment? It was a simple assignment. Did you? I already saw some. I think few people have sent the attachment in the Telegram group. So they are pretty good actually. What about others? Has everyone tried to create your own tables? Try to build relationships? I see some of them have created constraints and everything, but without the constraint, just the most bare tables. Have you been able to create it? Okay, so I see a lot of yes here. Yeah, okay. So I saw some of the answers. That's good. Do we need to post our answers, or is it? No, you don't need to post your answers to me. If you post, that's fine. If you don't post, also it's fine. The intention is you need to complete the assignment, because I cannot go through each and every assignment. There may be in future some specific interview SQL queries that I have with me. I will try to share that. Maybe those I will try to go one by one, but these simple assignments, you can do it on your own. If you have questions, you can ask. Okay. Haven't tried to build relationships yet, but I did create. Okay, that's fine, Tim. We'll be talking about that today. I didn't. Okay, no problem. So you, if you don't, if you are not able to create relationships, and you didn't have to create relationships using constraints, just try to create meaningful tables, right? The columns needs to be meaningful, and there needs to be some way we can link um different tables. So if you could do that, that would be great. Okay, so Bhavesh said yes with ERD2. Yeah, I think I saw Bhavesh screenshot that you shared. Pretty good actually, Bhavesh. Nice. Um how can I get the assignment? So, okay. Um in the attachment section, right? I think yesterday I added a file with the name session one notes, if I'm not wrong. I have renamed it to, I think, session two notes. Maybe you will see it today because yesterday was session two. I put it like session one. So in that notes text file, right at the bottom, you would see the assignment. I didn't able to see the content in the classes. What Ramesh? I did not get you. What content you were not able to see in the classes? Can we able to see the created tables in left side under data set? Can we able to see the real tables? Yes, I think if you're talking about the tool, yes, you can see it. Okay, I'll talk about PG admin a little bit. Okay, so I think it's 7:35 for me. I'm going to start. Okay, if you have any specific question, you can ask in the Q&A. I'll try to look at that whenever I take a break from any topic. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So, okay, so what I'm going to do is I have come up with this script. Okay, so like I told you yesterday, you in the class we created one table. I think the table that we created was, which was a table that we created yesterday. In the class we created, I think, customers table, right? Yeah, so we created the customers table yesterday. Okay, and I might have added one new column here. I just wanted to use this boolean data type. So other than this table, I told you that because you guys suggested all the tables and you came up with, I think, six different tables. So I have actually created these six tables. I have not created. Basically, I have come up with the script. Okay, and you can see it here. And one thing, I'll remove this. Yeah. Okay. So 1 minute. I don't want to have any constraints at the moment. Okay. So we'll start with just creating simple tables. Okay. And then we will go on to having constraints, and I'll explain you everything there. Okay. Okay. So creation of table is pretty simple. Just the command is create table, table name, and then you have all the columns. And as I told you, every column needs to be associated with the data type. What is a data type? Data type is basically kind of like a data rule associated to every column. This tells to the SQL that this particular column can only hold values or data that is supported by this particular data type. Okay, that's what this data type means. Okay, and there are hundreds of different data types. You don't have to learn every single data type. The five data types that I mentioned are the most basic and the most commonly used data types. These five. Okay, and this float, decimal, they are very pretty similar. Varchar 2 is very similar in Oracle. Int and number is also very similar, etc. Okay, of course there are differences, but for our day-to-day use, right, we don't really see much difference. Okay. um, okay, so what I have done is, just based on my understanding, I have come up with the list of columns that I believe each table needs to have so that we can have meaningful data. For example, in the branch table, because we are creating a banking database, I know that there needs to be a branch name, there needs to be a code, okay, a unique identifier, and then there needs to be a location, right? Then there is a products table. Products table, basically I want to store all the different types of products the bank will offer, like loan. In loan also there are several types of loan: housing loan, car loan, etc. Fixed deposits, standing instructions, etc. These are the different products. So what we'll do is, for each type of product, we'll create an ID, we'll create give a name for the product, and we'll just describe in short words what that product is. Okay, that's what this product table is. Then there is a customers table. Again, it has all the information about the customer, their name, phone number, address, etc. Accounts table, which has the account number, then the type of account, because you can have a savings account, you can have a current account, you might have a loan account, etc. So what type of account it is, the customer who owns the account, that is also mentioned here, and then what is the current balance in the account, that is mentioned here. Okay, and then I have a transaction table which basically has a id, which is a unique identifier for every transaction that happens, and then the transaction type. Okay, so we'll see what type of transactions it is. Okay, and then we have when the transaction happened, which account was impacted by this transaction, what was the amount of the transaction, and if the transaction was successful or failed. Okay, that is maintained in the status. Then we have the employee details mentioned here. Okay, now all of these tables I have come up with. I'm going to create this table. Now, before I do this, right, there's one thing I remembered, because I was going through a lot of chats in your Telegram, and I think some of the common questions were someone asked me to explain schema again, and someone shared the video about the schemas. I just watched that schema video, and I think it was about data warehouse. So I'll just try to clarify that a little. And what was the other things? Okay, I don't remember, but uh, so let me talk about schemas first. Okay, now this schema, right? This name schema is used by different systems or different applications, different in a different way. Okay, the schema that I am talking about is the database schema. Okay, and I think in data warehouse the schema has a kind of different meaning. I think you have star schema, and what is the other one? You have one more type of schema, snowflake schema, etc. Okay, I'm not talking about that. Okay, when I was talking about schema yesterday, I was not talking about the schema that you see in a data warehouse. I'm mainly dealing with databases, not data warehouse. Okay, so in a database, what I mean by schema is, if I can draw this. Okay, so let me do one thing. Let's say if I can have a Word document. Okay, so let's see. If I can draw something here. Mm, can I? I know we can draw here, but okay. So let's say this is a database. Okay, it's not very clear, but okay. So let's call this like this whole thing is a database. Okay, and what is a schema is, by default when you create a database, right, it will always have one schema. So in PostgreSQL, that default schema is called as public. So what that means is this whole database is having one schema, that is the public database. So whenever you go to that database, create tables or create any objects, load data or do anything, everything happens in the public schema. Since public schema is the only schema available in the database, everything happens directly in this database here itself. Okay, but in many cases what we would need is, we would kind of have a requirement where we have one database, but we have multiple different types of people who would want to use this database. Yesterday I gave you an example that developers may want to have their separate section in the database, testers might want to have their own section in the database, the end users or the business users or the clients would want to have their own section in the database. In that case, what we do is we create different sections. So I create one section here. So let's say this is my schema one. Okay, and then I create, and you can assign the size of the schema. Okay, so let's say if your database is 1 TB in size, you can create a schema with, let's say, 50 GB. Okay, you can allocate a size for that particular schema. Then I might end up creating another schema which might be a very big schema, and let's say I will give this to dev. Okay, so this is dev, and then maybe I will create another schema here. Okay, and this might be some, let's say, I don't know, maybe testing team. Okay, this is for the testing team, and then I might have another schema. Okay, and this might be something else, and this might be something else. Okay, so now what I have done is, one whole database I have created, one, two, three, four, five different schemas. Now what is the advantage of doing this is, I can create tables and any database object load data separately in each of the schemas. So if I create a table, let's say customers, okay, if I created a customers table in the dev schema, I can again go ahead and create the same customers. I can create another table with the same name in another schema, test schema. Okay, and both these tables will not interact with each other. In fact, any database objects that you create in a particular schema will not interact with, basically I would, interact would be a wrong word. They can interact if I give them access. Okay, but by default, whatever objects that you create here, they will only be visible from this particular schema. Okay, whatever objects you create in dev schema, they'll only be visible in this particular schema, and so on and so forth. The advantage is you can segregate your single database into multiple different parts, and then you can just give access to one particular part to a specific type of users. Maybe one schema to developers, one schema to testers, one schema to I don't know, your product managers or something like that. Okay, this is what schema is. You can you schema is, you cannot call schema as an instance of a database. Instance is basically when you have a connection, right? So that you don't mix that with instance. Okay, now this is what schema is in a database. Okay, do not confuse this understanding with what schema is in your data warehouse. In data warehouse, your star schema and snowflake schema has a different meaning. Okay, and I think when it comes to big data technologies, schema again has a different meaning. Okay, so the same name is used by different applications or different softwares differently, so don't get confused. I'm only talking about, this whole course is about databases and SQL. Okay, so every concept that I'll explain in is going to be in terms of databases. Okay, and specifically relational databases. In relational database, schema is what I mentioned here. Now, just to give you a clear, even better or clear understanding, what I'm going to do is, you see here on the, you guys can see the screen, right? Is it too small? Should I zoom in, or is this okay? Maybe it is too small. I'll just zoom in a little. Okay. Okay. Is this fine, this much, or should I zoom in even more? Okay. So let me zoom in a little more. Um, okay. So I just want to show you on the left hand side here. Okay. So you see here, this is our database, right? And then you see here we have schemas. Okay. And the same thing you will find it in any, in SQL developer, in if you go to any other RDBMS also. Maybe some of these will be different, but there's almost, you'll always find a schema somewhere. Okay. Uh, and then under schema, you see by default I only have public because this is created by default, but I can create my own schema. Okay, so for example, what I'm going to do is I'll open another session here. Okay, um, and I just click this button here. Okay, new query tool. It will open for the same connection, that is banking database in my Postgre user and this particular server. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a schema, create schema, and let's say dev. Okay, I'm going to create a dev schema. This is a schema that I want to give to my developers. Okay, I'll call it like dev. So I'll select it, I'll execute it, and you can see create schema is successful. Okay, now I'll go to my schemas, right click, I'll do a refresh. Now you see I have two different schemas. Okay, if I go to public, yesterday I think I created this table. Oh, I did not create that customers table, is it? So there are no tables here. And dev, of course, I have not done anything. So what I'm going to do is I'll create a table. So let's say I'm going to create this same table. Okay, I'll maybe I'll start with this branch table. Okay, so I'm going to create this branch table here, just like this. So I have my branch table script. I'm just going to execute it. I'm not specified any schema. Okay, I'll just execute it. You can see create table is successful. You can see the message. What happens is, in PostgreSQL, if you create a table without specifying which schema it should belong to or in which schema it should get created, then it will always create the table in the default schema. The default schema is the public schema. Okay, so what happens is, now if I just do another refresh here and let's see where the table is created. I go to, this is my public. You can see the branch table is created. If I go to my dev schema and if I look at tables, you see there are no tables. You see here, there are no tables here. Okay, why? By default, the tables, if you don't specify a schema, it will create it in the default schema. Okay, and let's say if I have to query this table now, so I'll do a select star from branch. Okay, you can see that I did a select star from branch. I did not specify any schema and it is showing me the data. Okay, this statement is exactly same as this statement, public dot this. Okay, here public is basically my schema name, and you can always access a table by telling schema name dot whatever table you have. Okay, if I execute this, you can see again it's the same thing. Okay, what this means is if I don't mention a schema, by default it's going to take the default schema. Okay, so this is what is happening. But let's say instead of this, now I have another schema, right? Dev. If I go to dev and if I type branch, now you can see it's telling relation branch does not exist. Basically in PostgreSQL, tables, views, materialized views, and triggers, I think few other objects are called as relations. So they just, that is why in the error message you see relation. Okay. In some other databases, they might tell table this does not exist. Okay. But in PostgreSQL, they show relation. Okay. But what I was trying to tell is I created this branch in the default schema. Okay, but now let's say I'm going to create this same table in the dev schema. How I can do that is I go here, and here let's say when I'm creating the table, before the table name I'll specify the schema name. Okay, so I'm going to say dev dot branch and I'm going to execute it, and it execution is successful. Okay, now if I do a refresh of schema and if I go to my dev schema, and you see here, now the branch table is created. So what this means is now branch is present in both the schema, same table name in the same database, but two different schemas. Okay, now if I go and do a select star from dev dot branch, you can see that I have this particular table. Just to make it more interesting, what I'm going to do is let me drop this table. Okay, I'll drop this dev and I'm going to recreate it. But when I'm going to recreate it, I'm not going to have this location column. Okay, I'll just change the structure. Okay, now I'm going to create this just with two columns. So I have created this. Now you see I'm I'm executing the select star from dev.branch. You see there are only two columns here. So this is a different table, even though it's in the same database. And now when I do select star from public.branch, you can see that it's the same table name, but the structure is different. The reason is they are two different tables. They don't, uh, whatever you create in one schema, they don't interfere with whatever objects are created in another schema. This is what a schema is. Okay, so you can create multiple schemas in the database. You can then have same tables created in these two schemas, and they will not interfere with each other. Okay, of course I can give access for database objects from one schema to another, but that's a different thing. Does schema exist? Okay, does schema exist in MySQL? I think they should exist. They should exist in every RDBMS. Okay. um, okay, how to define schema size? How to define schema size and everything I'm not going to be covering. Simple reason is, if I when you are going to create a table, there are a lot of different parameters you can set. What is a table space, how much size you want to allocate, which if there is a partition in your database, which partition it should belong to, and there are a lot of other things. I don't want to cover all of those things because they are not required for you at this moment. Okay, uh, if I start covering each and every parameter that you need for just for creating table, then 20 sessions will not be enough. I'll need to take at least 50 to 100 sessions. Okay, so anything that is unnecessary for you I will not cover. So that is why how to set a schema size, how to choose which table space and everything, I will not cover it. By default, if you just do a create table name, database will take care of all the different parameters and it will create everything with the default parameters. So let's not bother about that. Okay, so I hope schema is, I'll not cover it. I'll not go into table space now. Okay, not really required. Okay, I'm not explaining that because I don't want to explain that. I came up with this course with my own experience. Tomorrow, if my brother asks me, he wants to learn SQL, he has actually asked me, and I gave him this exact contents to learn. Okay, there are, I can still add 100 more contents, but it's not required. Okay, let's only focus on the things that I have mentioned in the course content because that is exactly what you will need. Okay, but of course, there will be so much more to learn as well, and that's the case with every programming language. There is always a ocean of things to learn, but let's only focus on the things that is actually needed for you to start working on any project. Okay. Okay, so I think schema explanation is pretty clear. I'm going to close this. I don't have anything else, and I'm going to keep this schema as it is. Let that be. I don't have to drop it. So now let's relate two tables in two different. Okay, I'm not going to get into question. Any question you have, right, you can put it in the Q&A. I'll look at it later. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create all of these tables. So I think I have already created the branch table, and I'm going to create all these tables. So I already explained you what columns it has, and I'm just doing a shortcut to create the table. So you can see create table successful. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to query the tables. So I have the branch table. I have the products table, I have the customers table, I have the accounts table, I have the transactions table, I have the employees table. Fine, right? Now the tables are created, okay? But if you're working on a real-time project in a company or something, every table, not every table, whenever you're designing a new database, always most of these tables are going to have constraints, and there is a reason why they will have constraints, okay? Now before I get into that, I want to show it with an example. So what I need is I need some data in my tables, okay, so that I can then explain you what happens if you do not have constraints in your tables, okay? So let's start by inserting some dummy records in few tables, okay? So what I'm going to do is, let's say I have all these tables. So let's say I'm going to insert some record into the customers table, okay? Now when I'm talking about insert, it's basically uh, okay, so if I go back to my PPT here, PBL is basically you're creating all the table structures, and DML is where you're going to deal with data, right? Now, we have seen create, drop, alter also. Truncate I will take up later, okay? But DML, now what I want to do is I just want to explain one of the DML statements, that is insert, okay? Now table is created, but you can see there is no data in this table. I want to load some data into this table, and the syntax or the command that I can use is insert, okay? So I can just tell insert into customers, and then there are few different syntaxes to create a table. Let me maybe use one of them. So one of the syntax is I just need to tell insert into customers. Just a minute. Okay. So I need to say insert into customers, and then here I need to specify all the different columns to which I want to load the data. So I'm just going to say customer ID, first name, last name, um, phone number, address, date of birth is active. Okay. And then I want to insert values. Okay. So since I have specified 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns, inside these values, I need to have seven basically values which gets inserted into each of these columns. Okay. So my customer ID is a varchar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have C1. Okay. And then my first name. So let's say my first name is Mohan, and I'm going to have Mohan Kumar as his last name. Okay. And then phone number. So let's say phone number, I'm just going to have maybe 990045. Okay, something like this. Let that be for now. And then I have address, and let's say maybe I will put it like Bangalore. Okay. And then I have date of birth, and maybe I will give it something like, let's say 1990 0507. Okay. And then is active. So is the customer active or not? I'll just tell, since it's a Boolean column, I'll just tell true. Okay. So I think that's all. Now what I have basically done is I have just given values for every single column, and from this table customers. Okay. So this is just one record. So if I execute this, now the insert is successful. And if I just query the data, you can see that the customers table now is having one record. Okay. So this is one way of inserting record into the table. Now there are a few alterations you can do in the insert script. For example, I'll just show you maybe a couple of more ways of inserting. Okay. So in order to insert the second record, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to specify this column list. Okay. So this column list specification is not mandatory. You can skip it. The only thing is, if you skip this, then SQL is going to expect you to have values for every column. Okay, because when you are inserting, we can also insert values only for a specific column. You don't have to insert values to every column. But if you don't specify any columns here, then you have to always insert into every single column. So if that table is having 6 columns, then you need to have 6 values specified here. Okay, so I'm just going to have, let's say C2, and let's say this is James. This is, let's say maybe Xavier. Let's say I'll keep it like 8 7. Let's say this is Chennai, and whatever. Okay. So if I execute this, you can see the insert is also correct. So this insert command also works. This insert command also works exactly the same. Now let's try to do one more type of insert. So let's say what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it here. And here what I'll do is I will not insert, I don't want to insert phone number, and let's say I don't want to insert address. Okay. And let's say I date of birth also I don't want to insert. So what I have done is customer ID, first name, last name, and this much is active. So only four different columns. So since I have only specified four different columns in my insert statement, inside these values also I need to only specify values for these four columns. So I'm going to have first name, last name. So I don't want to have phone number, I don't want to have location, and I don't want to have what was that last one, date of birth. Now I'll execute this, and you can see that this is also successful. Okay, so if I now execute my customers table, you can see that I have inserted. Okay, so one thing I should have given, okay, let that be now. So I have given the same customer ID for two different customers, and the names are also same. And yeah, so this kind of inserted duplicate records, but let that be, it's good. uh, Now let's do one more thing. Okay, I'm going to insert one more thing, and let's say I'm going to insert another record here, and let's say it is C4. Yeah, C4. And now I'm just going to have a null. I'm not going to insert any value in the first name and last name. Okay, and everything else let it be as it is. I'm going to execute it. Okay, so okay, so what I have done is I have used the insert command to load four records into the customers table. If you see properly, I have loaded the data, but there is a problem. The problem is very obvious, right? What is a customer ID? You all have bank accounts, and I'm sure you all have uh, a customer ID, right? You will definitely, if you're a customer of a bank, you will have a unique ID, and that ID is unique to you. No other customer can share that ID. But in this case, I have C1 here for Mohan. I have again C1 here for again some Mohan. Some information are missing here. Okay. Now this Mohan might again be the same Mohan. We don't know, right? Just by looking at the data, we'll not know if this Mohan Kumar is the same person, because two people can have the same name, right? And here the same ID is also repeated. This, even though I have successfully inserted data into the customers table, this is a very wrong data in the customers table. We cannot have two customers having the same customer ID. That is the first mistake. And then I also have another customer C4 whose name is missing. Basically, he does not have a name. How can you have a customer without a name, right? All this we were able to insert is because we did not set some constraints in our table. Okay, someone asked what is constraint. Constraint is basically, in the simplest of terms, it's basically certain rules that you set on your tables. Okay, so it's basically used to make sure that you do not have redundant, you do not end up having redundant data in your tables. You try to avoid as much as possible loading or having wrong data in your tables, and to basically have sanity checks, so that you kind of make sure that you only allow data that is intended for that particular database. Okay, so in this particular case, because I did not have a constraint, I was able to insert any I am able to insert any junk values into my customers table. Okay, but let's say when I was creating this customers table, if I had set some constraints. Okay, now there are a few different types of constraints. The most common constraint, or the most important one, is something called as a primary key. I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to recreate this table. So I'll do a drop table customers here. And when I'm going to recreate this table, I'm just going to make one change. That is, for this customer ID column, I am going to define it like a primary key. There are two ways you can define a primary key. Okay, when you're creating a table, either you can give it here, or you can mention it at the end also. I will tell that in a short time. But for now, I'm creating this table. I'm specifying that customer ID is a primary key. What exactly does this do? What this does is, once I have defined this column as primary key, SQL will understand that whenever you define a column like primary key, that column cannot have duplicate values, and that column cannot have null values. Okay, so that is exactly what it will do. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop this table. So I have dropped this table. I'm going to recreate this table. Okay, so the table is created. Now, if I query the data from this table, you can see there are no records, but you see here there is something called as a PK showing up. PK basically stands for primary key. Okay, this means customer ID is primary key. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert all of these values one by one like I did previously. So first record is inserted, second record is inserted. Now I'm going to execute third record, and you see here I'm getting an error, and the error is duplicate key value violates unique constraint customer, and this is basically the constraint name that SQL came up with. Okay, what basically this means is there is a duplicate key. What this means, C1 is already present in the customers table, right? Since C1 is already present in the customer table, I cannot insert another record with the same ID. Why? Because customer ID is a primary key. Okay, so this is what a primary key column does. Once you have defined a column as a primary key, SQL will not allow you to insert duplicate records into that column, and SQL will also not allow you to insert null values into that column. For example, let's say instead of C1, if I inserted a null here, okay, and if I executed this, again it's telling null value in column customer ID violates not null constraint. Basically, because primary key does not allow not null values, that is why it's throwing this error. Okay, so what is the advantage of constraint? If you are working on a project, you are building a banking software, let's say, and you created all these tables to store customer info, account info, and everything, but you did not use constraints. And let's say in from your front end, because what is the whole system? So when you go to a bank to create an account, you go and talk to a teller, right? And the teller will then tell you that okay, you will tell to the teller that I want to create a new account, and the teller will give you an form. Okay, so what you do, you will fill up the form. In the form you will have your first name, last name, your phone number, your address, and all these details, right? And then you will sign and you will give it to the teller. What the teller does, she will take this form and then she will have to okay, maybe this was the olden days. Today if you are going to create an online account, you will fill the form online itself. But let's say whether you fill the form online or whether you manually give a form to create an account, uh, that okay, so whether it is teller filling creating the account or automatically happening, all your details will get entered into a particular screen in the UI, in the banking UI, which is basically for creating an account. So your first name, your last name, everything will get populated by what you have given. Customer ID would generally be an auto populated field and everything. Okay, and let's say uh, by some system error or something, two different customers, the system generated the same customer ID. Okay, maybe there was some bug or something, same customer ID got generated for two different customers, and they did a submit. If you did not have constraint, it will accept that submit, and then you might end up having multiple customers with the same customer ID, which is going to mess up your whole system. Okay, but by having a constraint like primary key, even if the system had some bug, it tried to generate the same customer ID for two different customers, it's still not going to load this data into the database. Why? Because primary key will make sure that customer ID values will always be correct. Okay, so that is what a constraint is, and in this case particular primary key. Okay, now same way there are few other constraints. Okay, there is another constraint called as not null. What this will do is, if I define a column as not null, it will make sure that this column will never be allowed to insert null values. Okay, I know that a customer, whenever he comes to a bank, he should definitely give a name, right? You cannot create a customer without a name. So I can always tell that the customer first name and last name, or maybe any one of them, has to be not null. Okay, or let's say yeah, so maybe I'll say like the last name maybe can be null. I am not going to check for that, but I'll say first name has to be there. Okay, a customer should at least have a first name. Okay, in that case I'm going to do one thing. I'll drop this table again, I'll recreate this table. Okay, and I'm going to insert these two records first because they are fine. Then here, let's say I'm going to give, instead of C1 I'll use C3 because otherwise it will not accept. So I'll execute. C3 does not exist. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, this is one more thing that you need to remember. Here you see I'm getting an error. Can you guys tell me why am I getting this error? Anyone? It's throwing an error. C3 does not exist. Can you tell me this insert is not working? Anyone? Why? Okay, absolutely right. The thing is, actually the single quotes are missing. But even though single quotes are missing, you see the error message. In the error message, SQL is not telling that single quotes are missing. SQL is telling that C3 does not exist. You know why? since I gave a value here, C3 might be thinking that this is a function. Okay, it's something like maybe some values. C3 should be corresponding to a value. Okay, and that is why it's throwing this error. Okay, the thing is, whenever you want to insert an varchar or a string, you need to enclose the value inside a single quote. Okay, and even so, let's say if you have an integer column. Okay, uh, or so let's say, okay, maybe I will come to that integer and varchar difference a little later. But for now, I'm just going to treat it like C3 and I'm going to execute. So C3 is fine. Now I'm going to insert the last record with C4. And here it's telling null value in column first name of relation customer violates not null constraint. This is exactly what our uh, this particular constraint did. Okay, since we had defined first name to be not null, as soon as I try to insert a null value into first null, it's going to throw an error. Basically, it's not going to allow any insert with this. Okay, so I have to pass some value. So let's say I'm going to pass a value, maybe David. Okay, now I'm going to execute it. Now it's working fine. You can see last name is still null, and that still worked. Why? Because for last name I did not have any constraint. The constraint that I created was only for first name, and that is a not null constraint. Okay, so this is what not null constraint is. uh, Now, before I proceed, right, I just want to understand: is this clear? Do you understand why we use constraint and these two type of constraint? Of course, we'll talk about other constraints like foreign key, but until now, is everything clear? Any questions? Um, so I'll just go to, what is the time now? It's 40 minutes since we started. I'll just go to the Q&A session to see if anything. And you guys told everything is clear, all good, but we have Q&A. How many types there in constraint? There are several types of constraints. We'll see 5 or 6 types of constraints, but there may be more. As I always tell, you don't have to learn each and every data type. You don't have to learn each and every constraint. You can learn it along the way whenever you come across that. Okay, so let me read through some questions and try to answer them. If I alter table in one schema, does it alter across all the schema? No, it does not. Whatever you do in one schema, it is applicable to that particular schema only. Okay, so schemas, two different schemas, they don't, I told you, right, they don't interfere. So they don't, until and unless you specifically specify the schema name when you're doing the alter. Okay, then whatever schema name you have specified in that schema, that particular table will get altered. I thought a schema was a logical representation of a database tables. How they are related, is your definition different? So the thing is, whatever I mentioned, explained here about schema, this is what schema is in a relational database. And I told you that schema in data warehouse and schema in, I think, in big data platforms has a different meaning. Okay, in Hadoop and everything, there has a different meaning. So I cannot comment on schemas how they are represented in other systems or other applications. Okay, logical representations. Uh, Even I have seen, okay, some people tell schema was a logical representation of database tables. I don't know. Maybe there are some systems where they do it like that. But for relational database, whatever I mentioned about schema, that's what schema is. Does PostgreSQL support auto increment for primary key? Yes, they support. Uh, we have we have this identity type. I'm going to cover that in a little later. Okay, so we'll see that when I'm coming up with some SQL queries. Okay, how we can auto increment certain primary key columns using the identity columns, identity functions. If I want to update a table that are more than one, if I want to update a table that are in more than one schema, then I update it. The table is updated in all schemas. No, as I told you, right, whatever you do in one schema, it will only impact the. So let's say you have a table one in schema, okay, and then you have again table. So let's say you have customers table in dev schema and you have customers table in the testing schema. If you do some updates in the customers table in the dev schema, the changes will only be there in the dev schema. If you go back to the testing schema, that you will not see your changes there because they are not related. They are two separate sections. So as I told you, right, where did that diagram go? This horrible diagram. Basically, whatever you do in this schema, any update, creation, alter, or whatever, they will only be until this schema only. You will not see those changes in another schema until and unless you specify that schema specifically in your script. Okay. So all whatever changes you do in a schema, that only lies in that particular schema. Uh, can we do can we do joins between two schemas? You can give access to two schemas. So whatever tables I have created in the dev, I can give them access. I can give them access such that they can be accessed maybe from the testing schema. I can do that. Okay. How many schema can create in a DB? I don't know what is the limit. Okay, maybe you can Google that. I don't know if there is a limit also. I have never come across if there was a limit. Topic, I have missed first two session due to another reason. Should I go back and start from session one? Like, yes, you should go back and start from session one. If you have no basic understanding of SQL, go back to session one, cover that. Go back to session two, cover that, and then look at session three. Okay. But if you have basic understanding of SQL, then you can still continue from here. Overall, what is schema? Hey, I already explained schema in simple words. I'll not explain it again. You can maybe watch the recordings again. One can join two schemas by prefixing the name of one can join two schemas by prefixing the name of the schema. Prefixing the name. It's like you you should not be calling it like join. Like what I did in when I was showing you, right? I was basically connected to the database, but just by giving the schema name, the table name, I could access the table from different schemas. So that way you can join. Okay. And like what Sandeep mentioned here, schema name dot table name. So if you have 10 different schemas from the same database, you can access tables from any schema just by prefixing it with the schema name. Can you define ID as name and unique? Define ID as name and unique and primary. Can we define ID as name and unique? And yeah, I did not understand this question, Shantanu. Why we don't need to use single quotes for phone number? Okay, we don't need to use single quotes for phone number because it is an integer. Okay, only for text or varchar or characters we need to use single quotes. For an integer, we don't need to use single quotes. That's how it is. Can we define what is fact table? Fact table, part of data warehouse. I'm not going to be covering here. Why not just create two databases instead of two schemas? You can create two different databases, but in many cases, databases are not that cheap, especially for financial institutions like an insurance company or a database or a banking company. They have to pay a lot of money to have a database. That's one reason. Cost is the one reason. The second reason can be uh, sometimes connecting between two different databases is going to take more network time. If you have to do some inter database stuff, like you want to fetch tables from another database, it might be more time consuming. But if everything is the same database and two different schemas, when you want to interact between two different schemas in the same database, they will be much faster. Okay, there are specific requirements that a company might have for that. Okay, so how to see constraints in existing tables? You can see constraints in existing tables either going by the left here, or I think you have a table, if I'm not wrong. I think in Oracle you have this all tables, DBA tables, user tables, and I think table constraints, some time dictionary tables. But in PostgreSQL, I think we have a table select star from information schema dot. I don't remember properly, but let's see if this is correct. Constraints, information schema dot constraints, constraint. Hmm. I think there are certain dictionary tables. Maybe I will try to find them. Okay, with which you can because there are certain database managed tables where you can. So, for example, if I do information schema dot tables, I can then see all the tables that are created in my particular database. Okay, and here I can also select where table schema in. I can give the two different schemas that I have in my database, public and dev. Okay, and you can see that I have a branch table created in the schema dev. Okay, I hope you guys can see it. Okay, and then you see all the other tables that I have created in the public schema. Okay, so same way there must be another table for constraints. Okay, where you can see what are the constraints created for the table. I just don't remember what that particular table dictionary table name is. Okay, maybe we can Google about that. Okay, so this question from this Bhavesh, right? From here I will go later. I will stop for now with all the Q&A for now. Okay. Uh, so let's go back to So this question by Saurabh, right? We can do this using the check constraint. If you want to limit the number of size on a particular column, let's continue with the other constraints. Okay, so where was I? I was talking about these two constraints. Okay, now before I continue, let me show you the 5 different types of constraints. Okay, so since you now understand basic understanding of constraints, why we use them, so you have seen what is a primary key constraint and we have seen what is a not null constraint. There are few other types of constraints as well, we are going to see that. Okay. So let's start with maybe unique and check constraint. Okay, now there is another constraint called as this unique constraint. Can anyone tell me what is the difference between unique constraint and primary key constraint? Anyone? Does anyone have any understanding what is the difference between unique constraint and primary key constraint? No one knows what is the difference. Primary will not allow null. Unique allows null value, accepts null values. Unique will have. Okay, perfect. So you guys are all right. Now there is another constraint called as a unique constraint. So for example, uh, let's say I'm going to have. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a unique constraint for this phone number column. Okay, just for showing you why. Because I understand that two customers should not have the same phone number, right? I hope that's the case because if yeah, I think nowadays everyone should have their own phone number, right? Even though you are a kid, you are a minor. I don't know. Maybe in some banks, maybe they allow a minor to share the phone number of their parents. But for our particular example, let's say that in our particular bank, every customer should have their own phone number. Okay, and if a customer does not share his phone number, that's also fine. In that case, what I can do is I can give this phone number. I can define it like a unique constraint. What this will do is two customers will not be allowed to have the same phone number. Okay, so again I'm going to drop this table. Now generally when I have to add a constraint to already created table, I don't have to drop and recreate the table. I can just do that using alter. But since I am just starting to explain constraint, I'm doing this. In future we will use alter as well, okay, to add constraints. But for now I have created this table with this unique constraint here. Now I'm going to insert the values. So what I'm going to do here is, let's say I'm going to have the same phone number inserted for two different customers. So I'm going to execute the first insert. It's working fine. Now I'm going to execute the second insert, and here it's saying duplicate key violates customer phone number key. So what this means is unique constraint will just check if that particular value is already present in the table. If that particular value is already present in the table, it's not going to enter the same value again, okay, for another record. So that's why this is failing. But instead of this value, I can pass null here, okay. And if I execute this, now you see it's working fine. So what this means is, even the phone number is a unique constraint, null values are allowed, okay. So that's the difference. But let's say here, so let's say if I, that time we already saw, right, in a primary key column we cannot insert null values. Okay, so the difference between a primary key column, if you define a column as a primary key and if you define a column as a unique key, is that both will make sure that you will have unique values. But in a unique uh, column you can have null values, okay, and multiple null values. Okay, but in a primary key column you can never have null values. Okay, so in simple words you can say that primary key is the combination of not null and unique key. Okay, so this is what unique key constraint is. Now let's go to the next one, that is check constraint. Okay, now let's say, okay, one more thing I want to mention here is I'm going to share this script with all of you. But this boolean data type, right, we already talked that it will hold true or false, but this boolean data type is not supported in Oracle. Okay, as far as I know, I'm not sure why it is not supported in Oracle. So if you are using boolean, right, uh, in Oracle, try to maybe replace it with varchar of varchar, and then you add these values. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to highlight. Now the check constraint, where can I add a check constraint? Maybe I will try to create some other table. So, or maybe I'll use the same table because I have the insert script here. What kind of check can I have here? Uh, So so let's say I'm going to have a, maybe I'm going to convert this boolean into a varchar column. So I'm just going to say varchar of is active, right? So is active should be maybe true or false. I'll just say true or false. It's a 5 character thing. So I'm going to drop this table, and okay, before I create this table, I'm going to add a check constraint here. So I'm going to say check, okay, and I'm going to say is active. This column should always have either of the two values. So either it should be um, okay. So maybe I will tell it like this. Okay, so either it should be active, okay, or it should be inactive. Okay, so how many characters here? 6. Okay, maybe I will just specify the length as 10. Okay, so what I have done is I have created this column with a check constraint. What exactly is a check constraint? In a check constraint, you can specify any specific conditions you want to check for. Okay, in this case, I want to make sure that any value that is getting recorded, inserted into this column should always be any one of these two values. Okay, so that's why I'm using in here. It's going to make sure that if I'm going to insert active or inactive, then it's going to work. If I'm trying to insert anything other than these two values, then it's going to fail. So I'm going to drop this table. I'm going to drop table customer does not exist. Okay, so I'm going to recreate this table, and then I'm going to insert. Now here true will true. Okay, so let's say because I now changed it from boolean to varchar, I need to enclose it into a single quotes. And let's say if I'm going to insert it, it's going to throw me an error telling that new row relation violates the check constraint. Why? Because true is not part of my checklist here. Okay, so instead of true, I'm going to now have active. Okay, and now if I execute this, it works fine. Okay, so this is exactly what a check constraint does. You can, if you have specific requirements that you know that your column should have a specific value only, or it should always have values greater than 100 or less than something, or some basic kind of checks, then you can put such rules by using the check constraint. Okay, um, yeah, generally we do this for gender, where we have some specific gender, or maybe for transaction types. We know that, or the product types, we know that only these type of products are allowed. Okay. Um, okay. So I'm not looking at questions now, but fine. So I think check consent is pretty clear, right? Nothing too special here. Okay. When we will be maybe creating multiple different data sets and different tables, we will be using all of these constraints. At that moment, you can look at my scripts to basically use it differently. Okay. The last constraint that I have here is the foreign constraint. Okay. Now, anyone, does anyone know what a foreign key constraint is? In your own words, can you explain? Because all these other constraints are pretty straightforward, nothing too complex. But a lot of people get confused with foreign key constraint. So before I can even explain, what is your understanding about foreign key constraint? What is it used for? What does it do? Can you show more example of check? Okay, maybe I will try to show. Foreign key is coming from a different table, depends primary key relation between tables. Okay, values must exist in another table. Okay, fine. Foreign key maps to primary key to another table, it can have duplicates. Okay, foreign key is primary key of another table. Not really, but I think most of your definitions, I think you have some understanding. Maybe some of the wordings are right, some of them are not, but I think you guys have the understanding. So what exactly is a foreign key constraint? So in the most simplest of terms, foreign key constraint is used to build a parent child relationship between tables. Okay, so for example, let's say I have this products table, customers table, and then I have, okay, then I have the accounts table, right? But in account I have customer ID and I have account type. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, now if you look at my customers table, what this customers table has is, it has a customer ID, his name, his phone number, his address, his date of birth, and if he is active or not. This is what customers table has, right? And if I go to accounts table, I have the account number. Of course, there has to be an account number for every account. There is an account type which tells what type of account it is, whether it's a loan, car loan account, or a fixed deposit account, something like that. Then there is a customer ID, which tells this account belongs to which customer ID. Okay. Now the thing is, whatever customer ID that I mentioned here, he or she has to be a customer of the bank, right? I cannot end up creating an account for a customer who does not exist. That does not make sense, right? So what I mean is, so let's say I'm going to insert some records here. Okay, so I'll insert these 4 records. I'm just going to make them all active. Okay, and I'll insert these 3 records, and let's say I have my customers table. So I have 4 different customers. I have some values inserted here. Okay. Now, so these are the only 4 customers that I have. Now, let's say I want to create some account for a customer. So I am going to do another insert. Okay. So I'm just going to say insert into accounts. And here I'll not specify the column names. I'll specify the 4 columns. 4 column values. So account number, it's an integer. So let's say my account number would be, I don't know, maybe 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, something like this account number. And then my account type would be, let's say, uh, maybe this is car loan. Okay, or maybe, yeah, so something like that. Okay, and then maybe I have customer ID, and let's say my customer ID, I'm going to have C10. Okay, and then I have my balance. Let's say my balance is 9,000 or something, whatever. Okay, uh, or maybe instead of car loan, I'll just keep it like savings. Okay, so just to keep it simple. And now I'm going to insert this. Okay, what is the error? 1 2 3 4 5. Insert into accounts, syntax. Why am I getting syntax error here? Insert into account. Oh, okay, okay. So I missed the values. Okay, so this keyword. Now I executed this statement. Okay, and you can see that I have inserted the record. I'm going to insert maybe one more record. So this is C10, and let's say I'm going to insert C20. Okay, let's say this is 2000. Okay, and this account is, let's say I have 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 or whatever. Okay, so I'm going to insert this record as well. And now let me query the data from this table. Select star from accounts. Okay, so I have created the table. Okay, and I have added some records here. Okay, but the problem is, you see, these 2 accounts that I have created is for the customer C10 and C20. But if I go to my customers table, I do not have customers C10 and C20. So even though SQL allowed me to create accounts, basically when I say create accounts, load data into the accounts table, this is wrong. Why this is wrong? Because I created 2 accounts for 2 different customers who does not exist in the bank at this moment, or who do not exist in our database. This should not be allowed, right? If I'm going to create an account, whenever you go to a bank, even before you want, even if you want to create an account, you first need to be a customer of that bank, right? First they are going to make you a customer, and then they're going to create you an account. That's how banking generally works. Okay, you cannot create an account for someone who is not your customer. Once you create an account, he should always be a customer. Okay, that's the principle of how banking generally works. Okay, but because I do not have any constraints to control that, I have ended up creating accounts for customers who does not exist. How I can avoid this is by something called as a foreign key constraint. What I can do is, when I'm creating this table, so what I'm going to do is, I'll just do a drop here first. Okay, and here, okay, so account number, I'm first going to have few constraints. So account number has to be a primary key because it cannot be null and it cannot be duplicate. Okay, account type, I'll leave the account type for now. I'll come to customer ID. Now customer ID, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to create a foreign key for this. Okay, so what I'm going to tell is references customers customer ID. Okay, so is it customer ID column? Yeah, customer ID. So this statement here basically tells that I am creating a foreign key, okay, on the column customer ID, which is going to refer to the column customer ID from the customers table. In other words, what this means is, every time you're going to insert some record into this accounts table under this customer ID column, even before the data gets inserted into the customer ID table, it's going to first refer to the customers table. Under the customer ID column, it's going to see whatever value that you're going to trying to insert into the customer ID, is it already present under the customer ID column in your customers table. If it's already present, then it's going to proceed. Okay. If that value does not exist, then it's going to throw an error. Okay. So let's see that. So I'm going to drop this table, and then I'm going to create this table. Then I'm going to insert these two records. So I'm going to insert first, and you see it's throwing an error telling that insert or update on table account violates foreign key constraint. Okay. This is exactly what I meant by parent child relationship. What this means is, in this particular case, my customers table is the parent and my accounts table is the child. We always create a foreign key in the child table. What this does is, the foreign key in the child table will always refer to the parent table. If a value is already present in the parent table, only then that value is allowed to get inserted into the child table. You cannot have a value inserted into the child table if that value is not already present in the parent table. Okay, so this is what I meant by telling parent child relationship. Okay, so instead of C10, now let's say if I put C1. Okay, and if I execute, now it works fine. Why? Because C1 is already present in my customers table. So you can see I have C1 already present here. Okay, so that is why C1 worked. And let's say C2, if I execute, this one also works. Okay, now let's say I'm going to have another record here. So let's say C20. Okay, and if I execute C20, it's going to throw error. Why? Because C20 customer is not present in the customers table. So what I'm going to do is, I'll go back to my customers table here. Okay, and I'm going to insert another customer, and let's say this is with the ID C20, and this will be for, let's say, someone else. Okay, C1. And now if I execute this, so I'm inserting a new customer with C20. Okay, if I look at my customers table, you can see there is a customer C20. Now when I go back to this particular statement which failed previously, if I execute this now, okay, duplicate record error. Why? Because 1234 ID account already present. So I'll just create 567. Now I'll execute it. Now it works fine. Okay, so this is what a foreign key constraint is. Foreign key constraint is basically created on the child table. It will make sure that every time you are inserting values into the foreign key constraint column, it will check if that value is already present in the parent table. Only if that value is present, it's going to allow to insert into the child table. Okay, the rule is, whenever you're going to create this, whatever columns that you refer, right, in the foreign key, this column has to either be a primary key or it has to be a unique key. Okay, if it's not a primary key or if it's not a unique key, then it's not going to allow you to create a foreign key constraint. Okay, so this is what a foreign key constraint is it all clear? Any confusion about this? Okay, this question by Digital Tech Connect, that is correct. The data should already be present in the parent table before we can load it into the child table. Okay. No. Okay. From Surender, foreign key is not similar to your primary key and check constraint. Your primary key and check constraint are not null everything. It is specific to that particular column. Foreign key is slightly special or different because it kind of refers to two different tables. So the child table data will get referred first with the parent table. Only if the data is present, then it's going to create that record. Okay. Okay, can you show the C20 customer again in real first? Okay, C20 customer. So this is my C20 customer. I have this customer ID C20, Stephen, and then all these values. So since C20 is already present, I'm able to create that in the accounts table here. Okay. So the column must have a primary key or a unique key applied before having a foreign key consent. Yeah, correct. So let's look at that with an example. Okay. So let's do one thing. I'm going to create another foreign key. This time I'm going to refer it to a non-primary key or a non-foreign key constraint. Let's see if that works. I hope it's going to throw an error. Okay. Because that is what I have learned. I hope it works. Now, first of all, let me try to find a column. So I want to, so maybe I'll use some other table. Okay, so I'll say maybe I'll use the transaction column, transaction table. So my transaction ID is my prime. Okay, here I want to also tell one more thing. Now, either I can create a primary key by mentioning it here, Okay, just after the data type, you can mention this here, or you can also mention your constraints at the end. After your last column, you can put a comma and then you can mention that here. And the syntax is constraint. Okay, this is basically the constraint keyword. Then you need to provide a name, okay, for your constraint. So I'm just going to say pk transaction, pk column for transaction table, constraint name, and my constraint is primary key, and open the parenthesis and specify for which column, and the column is trns underscore id, right? So this is also one way of creating a constraint. So first of all, I'm going to drop this table. Okay. I'm going to drop this table and I'm going to recreate it. Now you see my syntax, this worked perfectly fine. So here also, if I now query the data from the transaction table, you can see it's showing here pk, means that transaction id is the primary key. So either you can specify primary key after the data type, which is actually much simpler, or you can specify your primary key here. The reason why we have this syntax is we can create primary key for multiple columns also. Okay, so for example, I can create primary key for transaction id and transaction type both. So I can have it like this. In this case, it's going to check for the combination of it's going to check for the values which is a combination of these two columns. Okay, so I can do this. So for example, I'm going to drop this table and I'm going to recreate this. Okay, now the primary key is created, but in this case the primary key is created for two columns. Okay, and if you want to create primary key for more than one column, then you have to use this syntax. You cannot do like you mention primary key here and then again you mention the same primary key here. This syntax will not work. It will fail. Why? Because one table can always have only one primary key. That is also another rule. Okay, a table cannot have multiple primary key, but a table can have multiple foreign keys. A table can have multiple not null constraint or any other constraint. But when it comes to primary key, every table needs to have, not like it must have, but it can have only one primary key. Okay, and if you want to create a primary key with multiple columns, then this is the syntax that you need to use. Okay, in this case what happens is the combination of these two values will be always tested. Okay, so so for example, maybe I will try to show you this with an example. Okay, so I'm trying to insert some record. So I'll say insert into transactions values, and here okay, my transaction id, it's an int, so I'll say 1, and then my transaction type, let's say what type of transaction it is. What are the different types of transaction that I thought of? Mm, I don't know, wait, let me check. Why did I have this transaction type here? Oh, I don't remember. Maybe okay, can you tell me what are the different types of transactions that we can have in a bank? Okay, credit debit is fine, but what other transactions? uh, yeah, cash withdrawal or payment, yeah, something like that, right? So it can be maybe online payment. Okay, so I'll just have online payment. Okay, so this is my transaction type, and then my date, I'm just going to use current date, default. This is basically a system function or an inbuilt function which is going to return the current date of the system. Okay, and then my account number, I'm going to have the account number that is okay. So here also, right? Okay, now before I can proceed with this, right? Or maybe I will tell it. This account number should be the account number that is already present in the system, right? So in this case, what should I do for this account number? Should I have a check constraint for this or some other constraint? Yeah, we need to have foreign key, right? So what I'm going to do is, okay, so I can also create a foreign key with this syntax, put a comma here, and I can say constraint fk underscore tr fk underscore maybe account number. Okay, and this is my foreign key, and my column is account number, and this references which table? Accounts table. What is the column name in the accounts table? Account number. Okay, account number. Okay, so I think this is fine. So what I have done is I'm also creating another constraint for account number, so that whatever account number that will be present in a transaction, it has to be it has to be a valid account, right? So what is my valid account here? Okay, maybe I'll take 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, not the best account number, but for now let's use it. Amount, maybe let's say 100, and then status, I'll say maybe success. Okay, so I'm just inserting one record here, and you can see the value is inserted perfectly fine. Okay, what I want to show here is, because I created this primary key constraint on two different columns. Okay, now let's say I insert another record here, and now I want you guys to answer me. So this is online payment, and let's say, what was the other type of payment you told? ATM withdrawal. Okay, so let's say I'll just say withdrawal. With, is the spelling correct? Okay, withdrawal. Okay, current date, and let's say maybe it's for 50 whatever. Okay, now I want to execute this. So can you guys tell me, when I execute this statement, will it fail, or is it going to be successful? Because I have created a primary key constraint on my transaction ID and transaction type, and transaction ID 1 is already present in the table. Now I'm trying to insert it again. So will this statement work, or is it going to throw an error? Anyone? Successful, fail, it will insert, check, payment, error. So okay, some of you guys are telling error, some of you guys are telling success. So error, success. Okay, the thing is, it should not throw an error, right? Why? Because I told you that, see, you see this is successful, and the reason why it is successful is because the combination of these two columns is a primary key, meaning that I cannot have duplicate values when I consider the combination of this. So here the combination of these two is one online payment, and this one is one withdrawal. Okay, so the combination of these two columns are two different values, right? And that is why it is okay to it's going to allow this value. Okay, so that is how primary key constraint works. So if you have multiple columns specified as your primary key, then the combination of values of all those columns is going to basically determine if it is a duplicate or not. Okay, so for example, let's say now I want to insert another record here. Okay, so let's say something else. What other payment I have? I don't know. Maybe I'll say test. Okay. And if I execute this, it's going to work fine because one test does not exist. But let's say now I will try to insert, maybe again, same thing, one withdrawal. And now if I try to run this, it's going to throw an error. Why? Because the combination of one and withdrawal is already present in the database. And that is why it's going to throw an error. Okay. So when you create a foreign key for multiple columns, or when you create anything, right? So you basically need to understand the combination of multiple columns is what determines whether it's going to fail or not. Okay, so this is okay. So I have explained you the alternate way of creating a foreign key, and alternate way of creating alternate way of creating primary key, and alternate way of creating a foreign key. Okay, so that is fine. I came here because I think someone asked a question about, what was that? I forgot. What was the question that, I don't know? So I think it was Tim or someone who asked. I came here to explain that, but then I explained these. Okay, so anyways, I hope this is clear. So you understand, even here you see. So let's say instead of withdrawal, I'll say maybe this is ATM withdrawal. And here, instead of the account 1 2 3 4 5, I'll just put 90098, some different account number. If I run this, what is this? Did I not create this table? So this is my account number, right? So this worked. How did it work? Because, okay, so what I'm going to do is, I'm going to drop this table. I'm going to create this table again. Okay. And because I have a constraint, foreign key constraint on account number, which references account number, and my accounts table does not have, okay, it only has these three account number, and I'm trying to insert an account number 90098. It should not work. Yeah, it did not work. Maybe previously I did not create this table, that is why it worked. Okay, so basically you can see here also the foreign key is restricting users to create transactions with the wrong account. Okay, so all this uh, control over the data that gets loaded into the database can be done by using constraints, and different types of constraints are for different purposes. Okay, I hope all of this is clear. Do you have any questions? So we have the last 12 minutes. What else I wanted to cover? So we have finished constraints. So one more thing I want to tell: when I complete a concept, you need to understand that, of course, but don't expect that now you understand everything, because you need to practice. You need to, when in the future, when I'm going to be creating multiple data sets and writing SQL queries, you will slowly get better understanding. Okay, so don't try to think that you're going to become an expert with one single session. You need to practice. You need to do some experiments, create tables, create different constraints, and play with different constraints, and see which works and which does not works. Only then you will get complete understanding. Can you show create transaction table one more time? Create transaction table. Okay, this one. Um, okay, so Surender, did you ask some question? Okay, what I'm going to do is what where can I see assignments? It's there in the notes. I'll tell you at the end of this class. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to Q&A. And okay, so we have the last 11 minutes remaining, so I'm going to spend this now to answer any questions. And if I remember anything else that I need to explain, I'll try to explain that. Where did we stop previously? I think there was some question from Bhavesh, if I'm not wrong. um, I think we need to have something like a pin or something. So I remember till which question I answered. Okay, this one I answered. So then I went here. What is composite primary key? So this composite primary key, right? I think all these terminologies, right? Uh, because when you are getting started with your career, you will use all this composite primary key names and acid properties and all this. But when you proceed with your career, right, we don't really refer to all of these naming conventions. We may be using all of them, but we don't really. It kind of doesn't click me already. So composite primary key, I think. If you create a primary key for multiple columns, I think that is what is called as composite primary key. But I don't. I need to check. Okay. I think it's the same thing. Probably if you create a column primary key for multiple columns, that is a composite primary key. Let me do one thing. Let me just quickly Google that. Okay, I think that is what it should be. 1 minute. Composite primary key. Okay, so you can see my field here, screen here, right? Uh, Difference is that it will be made by combination of more than one column. So that is exactly what I said. So if you create a primary key with more than one column, then that is what is called composite primary key. Okay, so these terminologies I may not remember, but that's what it is. How to add phone number size 7 numbers? Okay, so the question from Feraz is, how do you add a phone number? Should be added if I have column which okay, fine. So let's see if we want to add phone number with uh, bigger value. Okay, so where was the phone number column in the customers? Okay, in the employees also we have this. In employees we don't have phone number. So in customers itself, I'm going to insert another record. Okay, so let's say I'm going to copy this and I'm going to insert here. So let's say this is going to be C5, and maybe this is going to be someone who is this. Let's say Adil, and maybe this one I'll just keep it null. Okay, and this is phone number. So okay, so I'm just going to say 9900 11 22 33 44. Okay, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Okay, too many, maybe 10 digits. Okay, and let's say if I'm going to insert, let's see if this works. Okay, so I'm getting an error telling that integer out of range. Okay, the reason is this phone number is an integer data type, and I think only up to 8 numbers you can insert. So I'm going to reduce it to 8 numbers. Now let me execute it. Now it works. So 8 number works. I think more than 8 characters will not work for int. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert another record here. So let's say 3, and this will be my 6, and let's say this is Ali, and let's say I'm executing this, and even this works. But if I put 10 digits, and let's say if I make it C7, and let's say this is TFQ, and if I put 10 digits and if I execute, now it works. Okay, so if you want to insert a number with, it has like bigger numbers, right, more than 9 digits, then what you can do is you can change the data type is of this phone number from int to big int. Okay, and if you're using some other rdbms like oracle or something, then you can use the data type called number, okay, or numeric or something. You will have other data types. Okay, so here what I'm going to do is alter table customers. I want to change the data type, right? Alter table customers. What I want to do next, alter phone number type big int. Okay, I think this is the syntax. Let's execute. Okay, it worked fine. And now let's try to insert the same record. And now it worked fine. Okay, so this is how, if you look at the data, you see phone number is now changed to big int and big values are inserted. Okay, so if you are having this kind of issues, just check the data type that you're using. Okay, okay, so let's go to the next question. Foreign key is unique key and primary key. Okay, but before that, I had this question: what constraint should be added if I have column which should allow only a list of specific values? You can use check constraint, Nivedita. But yeah, I think you can use check constraint. Okay, and you can specify all the list of values there. Foreign key is unique key and primary key is another table. Foreign key is unique. Okay, this was the answer for that. So whenever I ask you to answer something, right, don't post that answer in the Q&A. Try to keep the Q&A only for asking questions. Okay, if I'm asking you a question and if you want to answer, try to answer that in the live chat. Don't put it here. Okay, let's keep this Q&A tab only for questions. Primary key. Okay, can we have multiple primary keys in one table? Example, no, you cannot have, as I explained, one table, only one primary key. Can we have primary key based on value of 2? Can we have primary key value? Yes, already explained, right? You can have primary keys from multiple combination. Foreign key takes the referral from primary key and same and other. Foreign key have more than foreign key may have more than one in a table. Yes, you can have multiple foreign keys. So, for example, let's say I go back to my transaction table. I have created a foreign key for the account number, but I also want to create a foreign key for another. Should I create a foreign key for another column here? Maybe not here. Maybe, yeah, maybe here. Okay. Can you tell me in this particular table, accounts table, I think we need to create another foreign key. Can you tell me for what? If you understand the table structure, I think you will know why. And if you understand this for branch, in accounts, do we have branch here? No, right? Can you tell me for type? Why type? Tell me which column and why. Anyone? No? Okay. So the thing is, customer ID, we are already creating a foreign key, right? Another foreign key that we need to create is for account type. Okay. Why? Because this account type is basically should be the same as what is present in my product table. So in my product table, I will have some product name. Okay. And so let's say I'm going to do one thing. Okay. So I'll create another foreign key here. Uh, Someone asked, we can have multiple foreign key. Yes, we can have. And I can have multiple foreign key like this also. References, products, and product name. Okay, so I'm just going to refer it to the product name. Okay, because this account type might be savings account, car loan, or home loan or something, and my product name would be something like that. Okay, so now if I execute this, drop table, and because other table, okay, now I cannot drop this table because there is a dependency, because I think I created some transactions which is using this accounts, right? So I will first need to drop. Okay, transaction, there are no records at all. Then which other table is using this accounts? So if I drop the accounts table, On table transaction depends on table accounts. FA key. Oh, okay, but my transaction table does not have any record here. I don't know why. So let's do one thing. Uh, is it not auto commit? Auto commit is already on. So, okay, sometimes, right, you might get this kind of issue when you're dropping a table that constraint you're not able to drop because it is dependent on some other table. In that case, one alternate way of using is we can use something called as cascade. Cascade. Okay. What this cascade will do is even though this table is being referred by some other table, it's going to still force it's kind of telling forcefully drop this table, and whatever depending tables are there, even that will get dropped. Okay. So for now, I'm just going to drop this. The drop is successful. Now I'm going to create this table again. There is no unique. Okay, this is exactly what I wanted to show previously. So what happened was, can you guys tell me why am I getting this error? I'm creating this table here, and you see I'm telling no unique constraint matching the given keys products. Okay, why am I getting this error? Anyone? The only difference I did was I added another foreign key for my account type column, and I'm referencing to the products table product name column. Okay, which does not exist. Cause of product table. Why? What is the issue with the product table? The table for foreign key. Okay, let's see who can answer this first. This foreign key creation for account type is failing, and I already have my products table created. So, for example, let's say uh, I have my products table here. So, product table is already created, but still, when I'm trying to create this accounts table using a foreign key which reference to the product table, it's failing. Why? Product name is not PK. Okay, perfect. So key PK or uh, unique key. Okay. So what I told you was whenever you want to create a foreign key on a particular column, whatever column it is referencing, that column has to either be a primary key or a unique key. Okay. Previously we created this because customer ID was a primary key. That is why it worked. But here it's not working. So you see it's failing because this product name is not a unique key or a primary key. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my products table. Okay. And first I'm going to drop this products table. Then I'm going to recreate it. And when I'm recreating it, I'm going to make this product names. Now I can either make it, it has to either be a unique key or a foreign key. So for now, just to show you example, I'm going to create it like a unique key. Okay. And I'm going to execute it. It's created. Now let's go back to my accounts table. And now I'm going to execute it, and now you see it works fine. So what this means is I have created multiple foreign keys in the same table. The customer ID foreign key that I created is referencing a primary key column, whereas the account type, the foreign key that I created on the account type column is referencing a unique key constraint column. Okay, so I hope this is clear. Let's go on to the next question. We are already, time is up, so I'm just going to spend another 5 minutes answering any questions. Okay, if I miss any question, if I miss to answer any question, you can post that question in the Telegram group. I'll try to answer that there. Okay, I'll just spend another up to 9:05, 4 more minutes. Where were we? Can we use explain what is a composite? Already explained. We all customer schema from one and another table like product from, for example, we call customer schema from one and another table like product. I didn't. For how PostgreSQL treats spaces and empty strings. Treats spaces and empty strings. Okay. Spaces is a different thing itself. It will be treated like space. Empty string, if you want to mention, you, I think that double quotes sometimes, I don't know, in some database it works and some database it does not. What I'm going to do is let's see how it works. Here I'll create C8. Okay, and maybe I'll give a name. What name can I give? Libinus. Okay, and here instead of null, let's say I'll give this two single quotes. If I execute this, duplicate key violates unique constraint. Which unique constraint I have here? Foreign key, phone number. So I'll put it 99, and now I'll execute. Okay, so I think this also works. So you can put null or you can put these two single quotes. They also will do the same work as null. So if I execute from the customers table for Libinus, the only difference I think here it is basically treating it like a null. So null is basically no value or empty value, but this this one, right? I think in PostgreSQL it's represented like it's still no value, but it's like maybe it's treated slightly different. Maybe we can Google what is the difference between this null and this values here. Okay, uh, we generally use this value null. I think in PostgreSQL maybe they basically are no values, but I'm not exactly sure why it is showing differently here. Okay, let's proceed to the next question. If I want to update a table that are in more than one schema, when I update it, table is updated in all. No, I already answered this, Raimondo. Whatever updates you do, it will only be applicable to that particular schema. How many schema can create? Hey, I think I already answered all these questions. Let's go down. I think I already answered this. Okay, I think I was here. So say 100 rows are still in cache, don't commit, command return, and if there is a DDL command executed, are those rows in auto committed into the tables? Okay, good question here. And I think this differs from database to database. When it comes to Oracle, I know that if you have open transaction, like what Bhavesh is telling, you have 100 records inserted into a table and you have not done a commit. Okay, so that means these 100 transactions are still open. So you can either commit it or you can roll back it. Okay, but let's say after that you did a DDL, like you created another table. Okay, in Oracle, the concept is that as soon as you do a DDL, all the open transactions will get auto committed. Okay, but in PostgreSQL, I don't think so that happens. Okay, or maybe we can try. Okay, let's see if that works. Okay, so whatever Bhavesh is asking, right, let's try to look at that with an example. But first, to do that, I need to remove this auto commit. So I'll go here, I'll remove this auto commit. Okay, yesterday in chat also someone asked how to disable auto commit, so you just remove this. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert, where is my customer table? Okay, so I have my customer table here. I have 9 records inserted. Okay, so just to be sure, I'm just going to do a commit here. Okay, um, commit means save to the database. Okay, now what I want to do is I'm going to insert 2 new records. I'm just going to leave some okay, so I think too many scripts here. So I'm going to insert, let's say, C, maybe 30. Okay, this will be, let's say, Shiva. Okay, and this will be, let's say, 00. Okay, and everything else is fine. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert this record and I'm going to insert one more record, one. Okay, let's say this is Vikram, and let's say this is 2, and everything else can be same. So I'm going to insert these 2 records. So I have inserted these 2 records and auto commit is disabled, right? So if I go to my customers table, it's having 11 records, but since auto commit is disabled, nothing is actually saved to the database yet. So if I do a rollback here, and if I execute this, all the transactions which are not committed will get removed from the database. Now, if I go to customers table, you can see it's only having 9. So whatever 2 I inserted here, because I did a rollback, they got removed from the database. Okay, this is what rollback does. But the question is, let's say I'm going to do an insert of these 2 records here again. Okay, and I executed the customer table. I have 11 records. Now I'm not going to do rollback. I'm not going to do commit. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a DDL operation. So let's say I'm going to create a test table. So create table test, and let's say I'm going to give a column name, which is a varchar. Okay, something like this. So I'm just going to execute this. So I have created a table. Okay, now let's say I'm going to see my customers table. I can still see 11 records, right? You can see the 11 records here. And now let me do a rollback. Okay, I did a rollback, and now again I'm going to do a customers table. And you can see here, since I did a rollback, that 2 records again got lost. So even by doing a DDL operation, that changes did not get committed into the database permanently. But I think this will work differently in Oracle. Okay, so now maybe I'll not connect to Oracle now, but if you try to do the same thing, Bhavesh, if you try to do the same thing in Oracle, right? As soon as you do a create, the changes will get committed to the database. So even after that, if you do a rollback, it will not remove those records from the database. Okay. I hope that clarifies. Can we call different schema for data? Can we call different schema for data visualization? Different schema for, you can query the table. You can write a query in a database, and the query might have multiple tables, and tables might be from different schema. You just need to put a prefix from which schema you want to refer to that table. You can do that. How can we add default value for any column if value is not given? Okay, default value. You can do that. So there is another data type. Sorry, there's another constraint called as a default constraint. So for which table can I add a default constraint? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this transaction table here, and there's another constraint called as default. Okay, and what default will do is, so let's say I'm going to say default is always success. Okay, and I'm going to create this table. Okay, now what this will do is, whenever you're inserting some records into this table, okay, if you do not insert any value into the default column, then, and if you have already assigned a default value for that, if you do not pass any value, then by default SQL will always insert this value into that column. Okay, if you do not specify a value, then SQL is going to by default insert this value. So for example, I'm going to show it to you with an example. So let's say I have um, I don't want to mess up these scripts because I have to share it with you. So I'm going to insert some records into this table, but here I'll specify all the columns. So what are the columns I have? Transaction ID, transaction date, transaction ID, transaction type, transaction date. What else? Account number and amount. Account number and amount. Then what I have? And status. Okay. Now here, right? So let's say I will tell failure. Okay, and I'll put the column status. Okay, and if I execute this, okay, transaction, this ID has to be unique. Maybe I'll say 2. Okay, and I'll execute this. Violates foreign key constraint account number. This account number does not exist, is it? Select about that until transaction block. Okay, so let's do one thing. I think there are some hanging transactions, so I need to do I'll do a commit. Accounts. Account. I removed all the record from account. Is it okay? So I'm going to insert. Okay, all these constraints when we have, right, we need to have proper data inserted. So foreign key constraint. Okay, so maybe I'll just insert one record. Yeah, I think account type violates. I think I created a lot of what is that? I created lot of tables, data, constraints all over the place. So now some of the transactions are open and some of the transactions are failing. So what I'll do is I'll try to drop these tables. Okay, so I'll drop the accounts table. Where is my, okay, I'll drop the accounts table. Okay, so let's do one thing. Okay, so this. Able to create this table is okay. Products table and customers table. So let me drop the product and customers table first. Okay, this cascade. So products table. Okay, so I think now let me create all the tables. So I'll create products. Let me create customers. Relation customer already exists. I did not drop it, is it? Okay. So now let me see the customers table. Oh my God. I think I screwed up some transactions when I was playing around with all of these inserts and changes. Now I want to insert some record into my accounts table. So Is my account table created? Yeah, but it does not have any record. So I want to insert some record. Okay, so can anyone tell me how to fix this error? Update on table account violates foreign key constraint account from foreign key. So this is my account. Oh, I understand. The thing was of this savings, right? Because now we have created a foreign key for this products, and in my products table, do I have any record? Where is my products table? I think I did not insert any record in my for products table, right? Okay, so first of all, let me insert a record into my products table. So, okay, so where is my products table? Here, insert it into products, values, product ID, let's say P1, then product name, let's say savings, then product description. I'll just keep it blank for now. Okay. Uh, made. Okay. So product table is now inserted. Now let me go ahead and insert the accounts table, and I'll just insert this record. So now it is inserted. I'll do a commit. So because I don't have auto commit, I have to every time do a commit after I do a transaction. So I have this table now. Hey, why was I showing all this? I forgot what was I actually trying to show. So I have my accounts table. I have one record. What was I actually trying to show in the first place? Can anyone help me remember? This accounts. Why was I trying to insert some record into the accounts table? What was I trying to do? Oh, okay. I was trying to insert some record into the transaction table, right? And it was for the default. Okay, so I was explaining the default constraint. So okay, now I'll insert the transaction table. Now the transaction table is inserted. I'll do a commit. Okay. Now if I look at my transaction table, you can see that I have the status failure. Okay, spelling mistake, but ignore that. So I have this. Okay, now since I have specified the value for status, that value gets inserted. But let's say now I'm going to insert another record here, and let's say this is transaction 3, and here I don't mention the status at all. That column itself I don't mention. Okay, and I'll execute this. So if I execute this and if I do a commit and if I check my transaction, you can see that it should have been uh, ideally it should have inserted default success. Why didn't? Oh, okay. I need to specify this. So what I'm going to do is here I did not specify any value, but I'm going to insert another record here. So transaction ID 4, and here I think I can pass some value like default. Okay, and here it has to be status. So what I'm doing is I'm not giving any value specifically, but I'm just using this keyword called default. What this will do is when you're creating a table for a column, you can pass a default value, whatever value that you pass here, right? Next, whenever you're trying to do an insert, you can just pass this keyword. Then whatever default value that you have already set when you're creating the table, that value will get inserted into the table. Okay, so now I'm just going to do a commit, and if I select star from my table, why is it not inserting default value? Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not working. uh, does anyone know why this default does not work? Ideally this is what default um, constraint should do. Anyone has any idea why this does not work? Okay, we are already past the time and a lot of people already left. But anyone here who is already aware of this default, any idea why this does not work? Because this is actually how it should work. What am I doing wrong here? Okay, never mind. So since we are already almost 20 minutes past the time, I'm going to end the class here. And regarding this default constraint, right, I'll talk about that tomorrow. Okay. So not tomorrow, in next week's class. And I also want to tell one more thing. So in the next week's class, okay, I'll cover remaining DML statements, and then we will cover the DCL commands, TCL commands, That's it. And then we will straight away get into writing SQL queries, basic SQL queries. Okay. So that is what is planned for next class. If you have any questions, let me know. You can ask me in the Telegram group. Okay. Can you please provide us with all the tables with data populated in them so in future we can have the data output as yours? This will help us identify if we wrote correct SQL. If we all learners have different data, execute their statements, they'll think they have written a correct SQL. It's going to save a lot of time and will be easily learners to help. I don't know, Bhavesh, why you had to tell this many things. I have already told you so many times that every script that I'm going to be writing in the class, I'm going to share it with you. So this scripts that I have already created here, right? I will share it with you. You can use the same thing to load, but this is just for teaching purpose. When I'm going to come up with a real data set, which we will be using for writing SQL queries, I will share the entire data set. So whatever data set I will be using, you will also have access to the same data set. And I have already told this multiple times. So you again said the same, you basically repeated the same thing. Uh, Okay, so I think that's all I have for this class. If nothing else, let's end the class. All of our classes are extending more than time. I'll hopefully try to end the class on time from next time. Okay, so if no other question, thank you so much for joining. I'll see you all again in next week. I think next Wednesday. Okay, for me, maybe it's going to be Tuesday for people in US. Okay, so I'm just going to stop the recording.